To make it less boring this time, we're gonna be staring at my Ravana X Pug kill that I helped some people kill it for the first time. And yes, I do click some of my abilities. Kill me if you hate that. And my cat for some reason just jumped right on me, and that wasn't very good for the recording. Never mind. First of all, let me start out by saying that there's different ways of raid leading and that different things work for different people. You should also know that raid groups tend to be far more unstable than, let's say, guilds, and you should prepare for the drama, fallouts, and other things that follow a raid. That's not to say that successful raid groups don't survive long. They do. It's just that raid groups are far more unstable than anything else I have ever observed. This advice is based on my experiences and beliefs alone, which are not necessarily true or translate as true for everybody. I welcome different opinions in the comments or any further advice that other raid leaders can give to people. Having said that, let us start. Advice on raid leading from Murta's perspective in no particular order of importance. Number 1. When making a raid group, do not go for "we have no raid leader, we're all leading" approach. Such approach makes it far harder to put the team back together when fallout happens, since to lack that person that can enforce order, give advice, or call out mechanics. Sure, you can give those parts of raid leading to different members, but ultimately it will be a rather unstable atmosphere. With nobody enforcing the rules will always be determined by the majority. So if enough people decide that it's rude to remind tanks that they should pull in tank stands, or that your healers, no matter what, no matter whether or not you need that, should never DPS, then that is the new rule of your group, and no matter how retarded it is, or backwards, you can't do anything about it. 2. Do not guild and raid lead. If you're guild and raid leading, I'm amazed at your ability to do both. Just re-recruiting for raids after fallout, counting people's misses, watching rotations, planning strategies, recruiting temporaries for when misses do occur, talking to people in private will take up most of your week. If you're doing guild stuff on the side, that's gonna be a very stressful life that you're leading. So try not to. 3. When starting a static and writing an ad for the static, be very specific. Where a casual static tells me very little. Is raid food necessary in your static? What would happen if team member shows up drunk? What are the expectations for people gearing up outside the static? How many bad performance days is a person allowed before they get kicked? Don't be afraid to write down negatives as well. If you're forgetting the core parts of your class, I will yell at you quite loudly, for example, is a good point to write down, because some people cannot handle that. If your ninjas are going in without applying their poisons, for example, and you do snap with "what the heck are you doing?" some people can take it very negatively and quit right there. That's why describing the attitude, both positives and negatives on your own and what is expected from the team, is very important. 4. Emphasize communication. If your DPS are trying different rotations in hopes of increasing their DPS, it would be good to announce said thing to the party. It's even more important that healers and tanks communicate together. If a healer will try to switch up and DPS more at a specific part, the tank should know so that the tank can pull more defensive cooldowns. If the tank is trying to save a cooldown here and use it somewhere else, the healer should know, because they have to increase their healing. Don't assume that your static has been communicating outside of the raid time. If there's many silent pulls with no change, assume that you're attempting the same thing over and over again, which is not a way to clear content. Another good practice is to stop the group between the pulls and ask what happened. "I did not do this mechanic properly," or "I messed up my cooldowns" are completely valid responses. However, without asking such a question, there may be some of your members that don't fully understand the fight or are understanding it wrongly, and without you knowing this, you won't be able to correct them. 5. Think twice about raiding with your friends. Will them being your friends impact how you react to their mistakes and underperformance? And if you reprimand them, will that affect your relationship? Think about that long and hard before you add friends into statics. 6. Prepare for it to be very personal when it comes to letting people go. Raiding is never separate from the rest of your MMO life. The way that you interact with these people, or if you interact with them ever again, changes considerably. Upon the fallout of the first raid group that I was in, we all blacklisted each other. Not that we hated each other as people. Not that the interaction outside of raid times was unpleasant. It's just that raiding falling apart did affect us very strongly, and we did not want to have to speak to one another again. My second raid falling apart was even more awkward because people that were in the raid group were not only my friends, but are also my officers in my guild. So I still have to hang out with them daily, and I still do. However, the way that I interact with them has changed considerably. There's no denying that now there's tension where there wasn't tension. Hence my point in number 5, be careful when raiding with friends. 7. Raid atmosphere. There will be a point where your raid group, unless of course you're the best out of the best, but for the majority of the population this is not the case, will get stuck on a certain boss, or turn, or wing, or whatever the game that you're currently playing is calling it. When you do hit that point, do anything in your power to not allow the general determination of people to slip. After a long time with no progress, people become agitated, snappy, and even worse, come into raid just prepared to die for hours. When nobody expects a clear anymore, the performance falls to such a level that a clear is no longer possible. If you see the danger signs of this happening, pull your group back. Maybe all you need is a day of talking rather than a day of raiding. Perhaps you need to prepare A, B, C, and D plans and try them all out next day. Perhaps it's time to look into who's performing the worst and catching said player up instead of banging your head against the wall. Or perhaps it's time for some content change. Do speeches, do talks, do breaks, but do not let your raid hit a point where they're no longer even trying to clear. In raids, people first and foremost have to be focused. If said focus is no longer possible, trying to raid further as is will not help. 8. If you're stuck, don't be afraid to ask for help. Reddit, forums, or any other form of popular communication among those that play the same MMO as you works. Write down your problem in depth and don't be afraid to be scrutinized from the outside. Having an outside perspective and getting suggestions about using tactics that you might have never thought about, in my experience, was a great help. 9. Duties of the raid leader, or otherwise a bunch of small points that you might want to consider. Here I can give you a list of what is a good idea to do while in raid or outside of it. A. Record your raid time somehow. No matter if it's through a parse, or game footage recording software, or anything like that. It helps to have that footage to revisit what went wrong and what can be changed. B. Call out mechanics. Might seem a little silly because people should learn them themselves. However, if you can foolproof your raid by going turn around, or stay away from the middle, or run away from the boss, do it. It's better that you have a higher chance of clearing than waiting until every single person in your raid learns exactly precisely what's happening. C. Don't be afraid to go and talk to the people holding your raid back. Underperformance does not necessarily lead to throwing them out of the raid. Ask what is happening, what they're doing, what they're finding difficult, and set time aside to help these people practice. The smaller point, if you want to be hardcore or simplify your life by a lot, Knowing every class in the game really helps. It's hard to figure out what your team is doing wrong when you don't know the skills of other classes or what they're doing. If you did level all the classes and can play them fairly well, it will be very easy to see what is going wrong as opposed to sitting there comparing your group videos to videos of other groups for hours. This is for the most part all from me. I'm sure that there are other people that can give you further advice, but that is what I gathered from my groups where they have gone wrong or right in my time spent raiding. Besides all that, the only other thing that I can tell you is do not give up. No matter how bad it gets bad for everybody. That's okay. And don't burn yourself out. Raiding next to competitive PvP is probably one of the most stressful environments possible in a video game, so don't let it get to you.